We break down the full Baltimore Ravens 2022 draft class and more next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is who covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. We're back here. It is not a mock draft Monday. And you want to know why it's not a mock draft Monday? Because we know the entire Baltimore Ravens 2022 draft class. Yes, 2022 draft weekend has concluded. All the picks have been filed and submitted and announced. And we now know all 11 players that the Baltimore Ravens selected and that will be a part of their 2022 rookie class. It was a whirlwind of 3 days, starting off on Thursday night, going to Friday evening, and then obviously Saturday afternoon. Baltimore, one of the clear winners in this draft, the phenomenal draft class. We'll dive into all of that here today. In the first segment, we'll talk about days 1 and 2, talking about who the Ravens selected on day 1, that round 1. Really whirlwind of a night where the Ravens trade away Marquise Brown, select Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, etc. And then we'll get into the day 2 picks for Baltimore there in rounds 2 and 3. In the second segment, we'll dive into round 4, 5, 6, and 7, as day 3 was a pretty big day for the Ravens, especially in that 4th round. So segment 2 will be devoted to day 3. Then in the final segment, we'll dive into just where the Ravens go from here in terms of free agent potential signings, looking at who the Ravens could go after, etc., etc. So we'll dive into all that here today. But before we do that, if you are here with us today in both audio and video form, we have a ton of information always about the Baltimore Ravens. If you like daily Baltimore Ravens content, we are here Monday through Friday, daily Ravens content every single weekday. If you're here with us in video form on YouTube, you can see my face and my background. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. It does help out a lot. Our next goal at Locked On Ravens here is 2,000 subscribers. So I greatly appreciate everybody who's already subscribed to the channel. And if you're considering a future subscription, I appreciate you as well. And I appreciate your future subscription. And also, if you're here with us in audio form, it's the same show as in video form. Both shows are the exact same content. Thank you for listening, whether that's on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Be sure to follow us, turn notifications on so you know when our content comes out. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at KOstriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. But let's dive into the content here now. Starting off with the first round, night 1, the Ravens taking Kyle Hamilton at number 14, which is just, again, in my wildest dreams. I know we did a mock draft Monday where I had him falling and the mock draft simulator did that. I thought that was just hey, look, the mock draft simulator did that, LOL, like that's not going to happen. No, it happened. It really did happen. And honestly, when the Eagles traded ahead of the Ravens to pick Jordan Davis, I thought that pick was going to be Kyle Hamilton. And I went on Bobby Trossett's show, his live show, to talk about, I think it was around picks 4 through 9. And I said after the picks had kind of unfolded, the one player I'd trade up for is Kyle Hamilton. And then he starts to fall past 10 and past 11 and past 12. And you're thinking, oh, is this really going to happen? And the Eagles trade up and you're thinking this has to be for Kyle Hamilton. But it was for Jordan Davis. Kyle Hamilton falls into the Ravens' lap, one of the premier prospects in this draft class. Safety was not a need for the Ravens. It was not. They signed Marcus Williams to a huge deal. They still have Chuck Clark, really good depth pieces as well, such as Tony Jefferson, Geno Stone, etc. But the Ravens, they just can't pass on that talent. They can't do it. And I'm glad they didn't do it. It was an A-plus pick in my book. Hamilton gives the Ravens that 3-safety duo with Williams and Clark and Hamilton himself. They can move these guys all around the field. I love this pick for this defense. I think Hamilton will be a starter, a star for the Ravens for a very, very long time. This was a great pick and just a great way for the draft to start off. But then things get crazy. The Ravens trade away Marquise Brown of the Arizona Cardinals alongside pick 100 for pick number 23. And the Ravens trade pick 23 for pick 25, and I believe it was pick number 130. And the Ravens select Tyler Linderbaum, the center out of Iowa. Now, Linderbaum, maybe not the best scheme fit for the Ravens, but he is the best center prospect to come out in years. A tiny bit on the small side in terms of his size. His arm length is a little bit shorter than you would like it to, but he is a technician. He can get to the second level, very athletic as well. He shows a lot on film that you just can't teach, and he also has things that he has been taught that he's gotten very, very good at. So he will, I presume, slot into the starting center spot, which is great for this offense, in my opinion, because you get Patrick McCary back into that super sixth role, which I've been talking about throughout the entire offseason. I feel like that is where he kind of slots in best, and that's where it appears he will go unless he does win the left guard competition. We'll talk about that in the final segment, though. So I think a very good day one for the Ravens, round one for Baltimore. Obviously, trading away Marquise Brown was not on my bingo card, but it later came out that he did request a trade, wasn't happy with the system. So when you hear that, you're kind of thinking, all right, a split between both parties, it kind of had to happen. If he stays, things could get toxic in some situations. If something happens here, something happens there. I'm not saying it would have, but there's the potential to. So I think it was just better for both parties to move on in that situation. So both just get a fresh start. Marquise Brown in Arizona, the Ravens with their new look receiving core minus Brown. So that's what happened on night one. Night two, another eventful night for the Ravens. No trades. They stuck at 45 and 76, but they let the board fall to them, and they did it very, very well at 45. They had their pick of a lot of good players. A lot of good players are there, George Pickens being one of them. But the Ravens go with David Ojabo. I think that was the right selection. Now, Ojabo is someone who, once he got injured at his pro day, I had said, if he is there at 45, I am taking him at 45. He was there at 45. A lot of people had him mocked in like the late first, early second, like 30s. He fell to 45, and I think the Ravens did right by taking him. Obviously, the torn Achilles he suffered at his pro day, not ideal from a this year perspective. Can you play this year? John Harbaugh, and Eric DeCosta have their opinions. The medical staff has their opinions. Ojabo has his opinion, I'm sure, as well. But what is clear about him is that he was a high-impact player at Michigan during the one real season he had on the field there. In 2021, he had 36 tackles, including 12 for loss, 11 sacks, 5 forced fumbles. It's not like he's been playing football for that long either. He still has so much to learn. Now, he relies a lot on his athleticism. I think that's maybe part of the reason teams are kind of scared about, what is the Achilles injury going to do to his athleticism? If you watch basketball, DeMarcus Cousins, really dominant center for years in the Sacramento Kings, New Orleans Pelicans, etc., suffered a torn Achilles, and it kind of sapped his athleticism a little bit. So you got to kind of be wary of those injuries. But I think for a player as young as Ojabo, who has so much bright ahead of him in terms of his football career and obviously his life as well, I feel like this was a home run pick. He reunites with Mike McDonald. He ends up reuniting with Odafe Owe, his former high school teammate. So I think this was an A-plus pick. It might not be a contribute right away selection, but this is a first-round talent when healthy. And so even if the Ravens maybe have to wait a year for Ojabo to play, it's like they're getting a first-round pick in next year's draft and giving up a second in this year's draft to end up drafting a player like Ojabo, who I think will have a very big impact once he's able to return. So he'll rehab his Achilles injury with Tyus Bowser, who suffered the same injury in Week 18 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you kind of have that edge room with a couple of guys recovering from a pretty serious injury. So we'll see how it works out, but I love the pick. I think that was a really good selection by the Ravens. Then at 76, the Ravens continue to just blow the doors off the first 2 days of the draft. Travis Jones, the interior defensive lineman out of UConn. Now, if you've been listening to Locked On Ravens for a while now, you know that during our mock draft Mondays, Travis Jones was a very, very popular pick for people submitting mock drafts to me to read out on the Monday shows. Now, the kicker in this is that he was a popular pick at 45. He was almost never available at 76. In some instances he was, but Jones was regarded as a early to mid second round pick, maybe snuck into the late first round in some mock drafts that I saw. But Jones is a player that just was best player available, fills a need. This was, again, just a home run pick by the Ravens. He'll be able to learn from veterans like Calais Campbell on that defensive line, provides an interior pass rushing presence, which I really, really like because, as I've talked about a lot before on this show, the Ravens have kind of struggled to generate that interior pass rushing presence for a decently long time now. So I'm glad that he'll be able to come into Baltimore and maybe probably carve out a role early on, depending on what ends up happening with a couple of the guys at the defensive line position. He accumulated 134 total tackles, 19 for loss, 8.5 sacks during his time at UConn. So he was a consistent member. He's also positional positionally versatile where he can move all over the place. So I like that about him as well. The Ravens love that, and they showed that again throughout this 2022 draft. But I feel like the first 4 picks of the Ravens, absolute slam dunks, absolute home runs, 3 defensive players, 1 offensive player. You're getting high upside, best player available, positions of need. I mean, they hit on all of these things. Now, there wasn't a cornerback selected in these first couple picks, not an edge rusher that is healthy at the moment. Ajabo is an edge rusher, but he's obviously not healthy at the moment. So day 3, it brought a lot of questions there, and obviously no receiver after trading away Marquise Brown. So day 3 brought a lot of questions. There were some answers to those questions, and other questions remain unanswered. We'll talk about what happened on day 3 for the Ravens in our second segment. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. So first, I do want to tell you a bit about Bet Online. And the Denver Nuggets, they are eliminated from the playoffs. It's a sad thing. I wish they were still in as a Nuggets guy, but the playoffs are still going on. It's still very exciting. The Grizzlies and Warriors matching up, the Bucks and Celtics, etc. So if you want to bet on those series, you do it with Bet Online. That's what I'm doing. And Bet Online is your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Be sure to head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet Online, where the game starts. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. And again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Again, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video on YouTube here. I appreciate that immensely. And also in audio form, be sure to follow along and turn notifications on there. I appreciate that as well. But let's dive into our second segment here, talking about day 3 of this draft. Now, the Ravens, with the acquisition of number 130 in the trade for pick 25, trading away pick 23, obviously, the Ravens had 6 fourth-round picks. And I thought, there's no way the Ravens are using all 6 of these picks, right? They got to trade away 1 or 2, maybe move up in the 4th round a little bit. There was a lot of talent available in this class, especially once day 4 began. And the Ravens started off this day 4 with an absolute bang, or round 4, I should say, with an absolute bang. They drafted Daniel Falele, the offensive tackle out of Minnesota, with 110. Now, this was a guy who, again, you talk about value, like David Ajabo, who was mocked to the Ravens before his injury at pick 14. Daniel Falele was mocked to the Ravens at 45 for a while, and the Ravens get him at 110. I mean, it's unbelievable value, an A-plus pick to me. He's a player that is a massive human being, standing around the 6'8", 6'9" range. Just he's a towering presence on the field. Reminds a lot of people of Orlando Brown Jr., and he kind of projects like him as well. Now, he doesn't have to start right away on this offensive line with the addition of Morgan Moses. You have a solid veteran that he can learn behind. He projects as a right tackle. You can maybe move him over. I don't really see that, though. I feel like he is more of a right tackle. But I think that you now have the depth necessary at the offensive tackle position, and that is the key, right? The Ravens, last season, they were 1 injury away from really not having a consistent player there at tackle, and that's exactly what happened 1 game into the regular season with Ronnie Stanley going down. So the Ravens this offseason, they have signed Morgan Moses, they have drafted Daniel Falele, they also have Jawan James waiting in the wings there as well. Pasha McCary can split out and play some tackle if you need him to. But Falele is a player that is a bit raw. He played rugby, so again, not super familiar with football. He's only been playing for a couple years, all things considered, but is still a very, very good prospect. A lot of things to learn, but once he ends up reaching his potential, it'll be another home run pick for the Ravens. I feel like he is in the right situation to learn, to sit back, not be put into high-pressure situations early. I think that's key for a player that, just to learn for a season or 2. I think that's really big for him. So I was all on board with the Falele pick for the first pick of day 3 for the Ravens in round 4. Then at number 119, the Ravens go with the cornerback position, the first cornerback selected. And guess what? It's an Alabama player, an Alabama corner in Jalen Armour-Davis, who I think is a player that is kind of just a value pick once again. Someone who has a bit of injury history, injury concerns, but is very long. He's able to play at a couple different spots depending on where you see him at the NFL level. A bunch of people project him at a bunch of different places, but the Ravens lost Anthony Averett during the offseason. The Ravens replaced Anthony Averett, who was an Alabama corner, with another Alabama corner and Jalen Armour-Davis. So he's a player that I actually mocked the Ravens in my final mock draft because I just thought Alabama corner, mid-rounds, this screams Ravens. And lo and behold, what happened? At 119, the Ravens end up drafting Armour-Davis. So he was kind of stuck behind a lot of players at Alabama. Obviously, Alabama is known and has been a very, very consistent football program in terms of success. He was stuck behind a lot of other really good players. So his first real significant snap action of his college career came in 2021. And he performed really well. He had 35 tackles, 3 interceptions. He has a really good frame, good closing speed as well, good footwork, tackles really well. So he has all these intangibles, all these tools that he kind of put on display in 2021. But again, it was only for one season. He didn't really play outside of that season significant defensive snaps. So the Ravens are taking a chance again on potential, but someone who showed in his one season of action that he can be a very quality player. And I mean, look, you can learn from guys like Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters in that secondary, which is a really, really good thing for him, especially with only having that one season. He'll be able to learn and just kind of take things in, which is great. I think he'll also be able to carve out a role for himself. I mean, the Ravens, they lost Anthony Averett, Tavon Young, Chris Westry, Jimmy Smith is still out there on the free agent market. So who are your guys who you're playing? It seems like Brandon Stevens is going to make that full-time transition to corner. It seems like Kadarius Washington is going to make that full-time transition to corner. So there are a couple other guys who could play. It feels like Brandon Stevens could really have a huge role in this defense in 2022, but I think Armour-Davis could carve out a nice little thing for himself too as he continues to learn, probably contributes on special teams as well. So I like this pick a lot for the Ravens. I'm glad they're able to secure themselves a cornerback, and it's funny that he was from Alabama as well. It's just so Ravens, honestly. And then at number 128, the Ravens take their first tight end of the class. Yes, we'll talk about the second one in a few minutes. Charlie Kolar, the tight end from Iowa State. Now, he's a player that's very interesting. Not as good of a run blocker as he is a pass catcher, but a very, very big target. He stands at 6'6". He's around 255 pounds. He can run a ton of routes. Really, really diverse route tree for him. He caught 168 passes for 2,181 yards, 23 touchdowns at Iowa State. And he's someone who he has such a big frame, good catch radius. He has good body control as well, so he'll be able to contort his body a little bit, make contested catches, which is really, really nice. I think this is a home run pick for the Ravens. I think that he'll be able to slide in nicely with Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle and just be a compliment. We all know the Ravens have been looking for that third tight end ever since Hayden Hurst left, and they've tried a multitude of different options, multitude of different guys. Things have worked they haven't worked in other situations. I think the Ravens fully investing in this position was one of the things that I wanted to see. I didn't expect to double down. We'll talk about that again in a few minutes, but I feel like it works out. We'll talk about that, though, in a couple minutes. So next at 130, the Ravens, I think this is the first really bombshell of the draft for them where people were like kind of split on it. The Ravens took Jordan Stout, the punter, out of Penn State. Now, it seemed like Ravens Twitter was, full unison. They were singing happy songs and everything was great. Then the punter gets selected, and it just became chaos. It was like, a punter, why are they taking a punter in the fourth round? And it was something that I talked about with Ingraven Vids. We talked about Matt Araiza, but kind of the idea of, is this the year that the Ravens draft a punter to potentially replace Sam Cook? And it seems like this is what happened. Now, the Ravens didn't necessarily commit to Cook being on the roster or not being on the roster. It's kind of more like a, hey, we'll see what happens type deal. But Stout is a player who is very talented. And for a lot of people, for a lot of the hype that Araiza ended up getting, a lot of people had Stout as the number one punter on their board. And the difference between Araiza and Stout is the fact that Stout has the ball placement and obviously a really strong leg as well. Araiza has more of the, hey, I'm just going to boot it down the field, go cover it type deal, which is he's still a very good punter. But the placement that Sam Cook has on his punts, we have seen time and time again, him pin opponents back inside the 20, inside the 10, give that opponent terrible field position, which then if the Ravens defense forces a 3 and out, then the Ravens get good field position on offense. The special teams value for this team, they value it more than any other team in the NFL. They are a team that understands that you have to win in all 3 phases. And a lot of teams do understand that, but the Ravens invest in their punter position. Stout is someone who does a lot of good things as a punter. Again, I mentioned the placement, I mentioned the booming leg, but it just feels like this is the end of the road for Sam Cook, unfortunately. He's been such a staple in this organization, such a role model player in this organization, both as a player and as a person. I think he deserves to kind of sneak into the Ring of Honor, honestly. So you look at what he's brought to the organization, but at the same time, good things, they all come to an end at some point. It's unfortunate, but for Baltimore, this is a move that they decided to make now. I think Stout was a player that they really liked, and so that's what they ended up going with. So he's a player that I think will be able to contribute for a very long time in Baltimore because of what he showed on the tape and obviously in the games that he played at Penn State. But next at number 139, the Ravens end up taking Isaiah Likely, the tight end out of Coastal Carolina. So the second tight end taken, kind of cast some doubt. I wouldn't say doubt. I said it would cast some interesting theories on if the Ravens will keep 3 tight ends, 4 tight ends, because now the tight end room looks like Mark Andrews, Nick Boyle, Isaiah Likely, and Charlie Goller. So it's like, all right, where are these guys playing? Who's making the roster? But that's a conversation for a different day. For now, Likely someone who I think was drafted very, very late. The Ravens, I think, got another very good value pick, and he got 133 passes for 2,050 yards, 27 touchdowns during his 4 years at Coastal Carolina. He has great ball skills, great athleticism, really strong hands, and can line up in multiple different areas. He was a former wide receiver, so he can run routes very, very well. You can see the crispness and smoothness in his route. So I really like this pick, and the Ravens have doubled down at tight end before, obviously taking Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews in the same draft, Dennis Pitta and Dixon in the same draft, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something they are very familiar with, and hopefully both these guys will be able to contribute at a very high level. They'll be able to learn from Andrews and Boyle. And if the Ravens do keep 4 tight ends, that is a very, very good tight end room, all things considered. I feel like at least one of those guys will become that third tight end the Ravens have been looking for. But again, hopefully both of them will contribute. Next to number 141, the Ravens doubled down in another position, this time cornerback, taking Demarion Williams, the corner from Houston. Now, Williams does have positional versatility. He played on the outside, played in the slot, played some safety. He does kind of project more as a slot guy. He's a bit undersized to play outside corner at the NFL level for the most part, but if there's an emergency, if the Ravens are down 8 corners again, you can put him there if you need him to, or if you need to. But I think for the Ravens, a good pick overall, not the cornerback that I expected him to take, but still, I don't necessarily hate this pick whatsoever. He plays with a competitive fire. He's tough. He's sticky in coverage. He participates in the run game. He's someone who kind of screams Raven player. Like Armour-Davis and Williams both kind of scream Ravens corner, so it makes sense why they drafted him. In all honesty, he totaled 163 tackles and 3 interceptions during his time with Houston. He's only 5'10", though, as I mentioned, so he does profile is that replacement for Tavon Young. So if they get that Tavon Young replacement here, I'm content with that. The Ravens, that they value their cornerbacks. They value that secondary. They double dipped at the position at corner. They obviously invested in the safety position with Kyle Hamilton at 14. So secondary, again, a theme for the Ravens as a position that they really, really want to shore up and make sure is shored up for the team. But finally, the Ravens had 1 6th-round selection, and they took Tyler Beatty, the running back from Missouri. Now, kind of a sidetrack here. Tyler Beatty actually went to my high school. We overlapped in high school. He was 2 years below me, kind of showing my age a little bit there, but it's kind of funny how these things work out. So I'm super happy for him. And now that he's back in Baltimore, it's just a really cool, surreal thing. It's funny, but Beatty was a very productive player at Missouri. In the SEC, which we all know is a very, very tough conference, 513 attempts, 2,740 yards, 23 touchdowns. He also caught 126 passes for 1,149 yards and 11 touchdowns. And he's somebody, again, dual threat player, runs really, really hard, bounces off of players. His balance is just off the charts. He stays upright. He gets hit, he stays upright, he keeps running. Gets hit again, stays upright, keeps running. And I think, look, we were talking about all offseason how the Ravens needed to draft another running back just in the event that either J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards, the recovery didn't go as well as they would hope. And so Beatty, I think, has the potential, especially in this run-heavy offense, to carve out a decent role for himself, especially on third downs, assuming he does win this job. He'll be competing with Justice Hill and Tyson Williams and Nate McCrary. So 11 total draft picks for the Ravens, a lot of talent, a lot of positional needs filled. Still some questions to be answered, though. We'll talk about those questions in the final segment of our show here. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still something to talk about on Locked on Ravens. First, let me tell you a bit about Built Bar. And if you didn't know, summer is coming. It's around the corner, and you need some food on the go for summer. And Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on a family vacation. You can throw them in your bags or in your kids' backpacks. You have to make sure everyone has a bar, though, so you're fueled for summer adventures. And the best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and delicious as well. All Built Bars and the Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. And with Built Bar, you can have the best flavors as well, like banana cream pie and even churro, which is really, really good as well. My favorite is mint brownie, but there are so many to choose from. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So go to Built.com to get all your favorite flavors, including banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, and so many more. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. We return here with our final segment of this Locked On Ravens Monday edition. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And it feels kind of weird not to do a mock draft Monday here today. We've been doing them for so many months, and just the ability to mock all these guys it's weird, but I'm glad we know the draft class. But also, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to check out Locked On NFL. I'm actually hosting that Monday show this week, so if you want to hear my voice again and hear me talk for 30 more minutes, go over to Locked On NFL. We interview some hosts over there, talk about the NFL draft, talk with Locked On Cardinals about Marquise Brown. So very interesting stuff over there if you want to check out the Locked On NFL YouTube channel or podcast in audio form. But the Ravens have a lot of questions still to answer. The draft answered some of those questions. It did not answer other questions, and in fact, made some questions a bit bigger than they already were. I think the number one question is the wide receiver position. The Ravens now, in terms of guys who you realistically expect to make this roster, or at least you did before the draft, it was Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, and Tylan Wallace, right? Those were the 4 guys still on the roster at this point, and obviously Marquise Brown was in that group. But you're thinking, all right, yeah, for sure. Like, the Ravens will have these guys. It'll be awesome. They'll add a receiver during the draft. Well, the Ravens, they add no receivers and trade away their number 1. So at this point, it's like, at the wide receiver position, who are the Ravens throwing to, right? Obviously, Mark Andrews is another really, really good offensive weapon from a pass-catching perspective. But at this point, it seems like it is going to be the Rashad Bateman show as the number 1 receiver, and the Mark Andrews show is probably the number 1 offensive weapon pass-catching-wise in this offense. Now, I'm not discounting Devin Duvernay or James Prochet or Tylan Wallace or any of those guys. I mean, they're all good. Really, really good players. But I feel like the Ravens, they need more there, right? They just need a little bit more. I think they need a veteran in this room. The Ravens got rid of both of their receivers in the 2019 draft class. And we have talked before, if you were with me last offseason, we talked about how young this room was. Last offseason, it was 2 third-year guys, 2 second-year guys, and 2 rookies. Now, fast forward to where we are now, it's 2 third-year guys and 2 second-year guys, right? That's it. You can look at guys like Benjamin Victor and Jalen Moore and whoever, but right now, I think the Ravens need a veteran in that room like a Sammy Watkins. Now, I think they need a bit better of a player than Sammy Watkins. Some of the best guys out there at the time of this recording include Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, one of them would have been signed. I'm not sure, but if this is the time of this recording, those are the guys, right? There's T.Y. Hilton as well, but he's spurring the Ravens. So would he really want to come to Baltimore, right? There are other options as well, but who are you looking at on the trade market? Do you make a move for a Deebo Samuel or Terry McLaurin or DK Metcalf? It's an option. But the Ravens just trading away a receiver who's probably going to make around 20, 25 million per season to Marquise Brown. Was that part of the equation there? Obviously, it seems like it was just the trade request, but maybe the Ravens want to go after that guy and give up a first rounder or something of that nature because they actually acquired another one for Marquise Brown at 23, which they traded for 25. So maybe they think that's their first rounder for next year. They can go get a wide receiver like DK Metcalf. And maybe there are other smaller options, and quote unquote smaller options like Adam Thielen, who I really like potentially. So there are options they could potentially have, but at this point, it just feels like they need someone else. I am on the Jarvis Landry train. I actually have been even before Marquise Brown was traded away, but I think it just seems like it's a solid option who can play in the slot. You can do so many things with him. And I feel like the competitive toughness he plays with obviously did have a run-in with Marcus Peters. So you gotta kind of figure out if that's going to be okay in the locker room, but I think it'd be okay. Julio Jones, I think, would be a fine option, but you'd have to kind of go with the fact that he's probably going to miss a lot of games. I mean, a player like Julio Jones, who is so talented when he's healthy, you have that potential. You've seen it year in and year out with Atlanta, but he misses games a lot. The injury history is there. So if you're signing him and saying, hey, we're going to give you this huge role, Julio, but then he gets injured and can't play half the season. What good does that do you? It leaves you searching for more answers. So that's something you have to keep in mind. Odell Beckham, very talented, obviously, coming off of the ACL. He had a run-in with Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. So you got to look at that in the locker room as well. I think, for me, Jarvis Landry, I like Adam Thielen a lot. I really wish they had gotten DJ Chark. DJ Chark, I love DJ Chark. He signed with Detroit. I feel like that would have been a great option, but obviously you can't really predict those things. The thing that surprised me about the Marquise Brown trade was how secret it was. How secret it was that the Cardinals and the Ravens could keep it such a secret. And then all of a sudden, you're like, okay, the Ravens trade Marquise Brown to the Cardinals. Cool. Marquise Brown shows up at the Cardinals draft party not more than like 10 minutes after the announcement was made. And you're like, oh, he's already there. This has been in the works for a while. And I went on the NFL draft show. It's the funny story that, I did the questions, answered the questions, and then all of a sudden it was, oh, well, all right, we'll see you again at pick 23. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea. And they're like, oh, the Ravens traded Marquise Brown. And I'm like, oh, wow, all right. So now the Ravens don't have the number one. They have talented receivers there, but I feel like they just need another veteran in that room. And then one of these undrafted guys, potentially Slade Bolden, is someone on Alabama who people like a lot, and he could be an option for them. They sounded a few others as well. The Ravens undrafted class includes a couple of guys who were kind of the top of the class for them. Charles Wiley out of UTSA, who was a really good linebacker there. Josh Ross, actually out of Michigan, who I mocked to the Ravens in my final mock draft in the 6th round. Another question for the Ravens is the offensive line and how it will look, obviously. To me, Falele is a backup year one, unless there is an injury. Obviously, you have to look at Ronnie Stanley. Is he going to be back? Is he not? Assuming he is, we're just going to assume everybody's fully healthy. Obviously, we don't know if that's the case or not, but assuming everyone's fully healthy, it's going to be Ronnie Stanley at left tackle. Obviously, Tyler Linderbaum at center. You have Kevin Zeitler at right guard and Morgan Moses at right tackle, in my opinion. The one key question mark is left guard. I think if everything stays the way it is, you're going to probably have a 4-man competition for that spot between Patrick McCary, Tyree Phillips, Ben Cleveland, and Ben Powers. And honestly, the Ravens offensive line is so deep right now. They probably cannot keep any undrafted free agents. They're probably going to have to cut 1 or 2 veterans. We could see like a Ben Bredesen type trade with a guy like Ben Powers or Tyree Phillips if one of those guys just isn't going to make the roster and the Ravens know it, and they try to get another pick, like a 4th rounder, that 4th round value that they got for Bredesen. I think it was Bredesen in the 6th for a 4th. I mean, that's a great trade for a guy who's not going to make the roster. So you look at it that way, and I feel like the Ravens could have that because they have a lot of depth at the offensive line position, especially at the guard position now, right? They didn't have a lot of that last season. They started off the offseason with it, traded away some of it, like with Greg Mance, who wasn't going to make the roster anyway, and Ben Bredesen, and then the injuries just kept coming and coming and coming. But now there's a key question as to, like, will Tristan Colon make this roster, right? There are a couple other guys potentially who will, who won't, but that's another question for sure. You then look to the cornerback position, where a guy's going to slot in. Obviously, with Armour-Davis and with Williams in there as well, you have more options. But again, as I kind of mentioned, you have, I think, what will probably be Brandon Stevens moving down to corner, or Darius Washington moving down to corner. So you have those 2 options there, along with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. Does a veteran get signed? They could sign a veteran. Joe Hayden's still out there if they want to sign him, a couple others as well. So you look at that as a question. Then what do the Ravens do with both Sam Cook and Nick Boyle? Cook is someone who obviously would save them around $2.1 million in cap space. So you look at that as all right, if the Ravens aren't going to keep 2 punters, which I don't think they should, it seems like this is the writing on the wall for Sam Cook, unfortunately. That's a move that they should probably make. And then Nick Boyle as well. Will they make that move? That would save them some money. I feel like it's a lot more possible that Nick Boyle stays on this roster, though. I think they should keep him. I think they should go 4 tight ends, honestly, especially if they only keep 5 wide receivers, which could be a real possibility this season. It could just be better to keep the 4 tight ends and use Isaiah Likely like a wide receiver. So still tons of questions on this team, but the 2022 draft for the Ravens was an absolute success. We'll talk about grades later in the week. We'll talk about this draft class later in the week, breaking down the prospects more and more throughout the coming weeks as well. So be sure to stay tuned for all of that content. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked on Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to get back in tomorrow. We'll be diving into more Ravens content, of course. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.